A guy who got perfect marks tells you that you don't need to worry about your marks in school because when you get the perfect score, the newspaper will cover it and one of the other people who then also got perfect marks will then just give you a job so you don't need to worry about what marks you get. Just because you get the highest possible marks in high school doesn't mean you have to do the university or college course that's the hardest to get into is the advice that applies to possibly less than 1% of 1% of people. Don't worry about your school marks, they just give you a high-paying job. It sounds a bit crazy, but that's how this article, entitled BCE 2020, Students Who Got the Perfect ATAR Reveal Where It Took Them, in the Age. ATAR is the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank, which is the equivalent of the GCSEs in the UK, the GPA in America, and so on. I do want to make it clear though that this article is coming from a good place, however it does really seem completely out of touch. It would seem that a better approach would be to write an article on how someone who failed high school got a good job to put this all into perspective. Not someone who got perfect marks then got covered in a major newspaper. Then whilst at the photo shoot for that article, someone else who got perfect marks in the past gave him a job. That's great for Shahil Shekhar, which I'm probably mispronouncing, which I apologize. That's who the first part of this article is about. But realistically, the average person is never going to be going for a photo shoot for a newspaper, let alone one that has someone else there who can offer them a high-paying job. The sentiment behind the article is good. It does go on to quote Sahil with saying, to any Year 12 students who are worried because of their score, there are a lot of people who do really well in life who didn't do well in school. Sure, you see a lot of people succeeding without great ATARs, which is absolutely true and great advice everyone should get. But the example given is quite the opposite and possibly more out of touch than saying you need to study hard to get a good career. There are a lot of people who do really well in life who didn't do well in school, but Sahil isn't one of them. He did really well in school. The Age posted this article with this quote on social media, I think to be controversial, and that probably makes it come off as more sanctimonious than even the writer probably intended. I do want to point out that Sahil was probably just asked questions and he didn't write this article or put it together, so I have nothing critical to say about him. He genuinely seems like a successful and well-rounded guy. The problem with this article is not that it's coming from a bad place, but more endemic of the issues of the media, where a story is only worth covering if the key elements are either extremely good or extremely bad. So instead of taking a run-of-the-mill person who got average marks and then explaining how they now have an awesome job, which is something that the majority of people can relate to, given that the majority of people fall into the average category. Instead, it has to be either someone who got the worst marks possible, or in this case, perfect marks. High school is almost completely irrelevant unless you want to study specific courses. Law and medicine, for example, are professions that you have to do well in high school to get into. Nearly every other career, if you are really interested, there are other pathways to get into them, even with poor high school marks. Also, absolutely no one has ever asked me in the workplace what high school marks I actually got. Even university degrees are barely even asked about, especially if you build skills outside of this and can point to your experience instead of the schooling. Now, the article does quote something similar too. Once you're in the workforce, I don't think that people look back at your score too often. You are more judged on the work you were doing at the time, as the article quotes Stephanie Mull, which again, I apologize if I've mispronounced your name there. However, Stephanie is working in law, and the article says that she studied art/law at the University of Melbourne, which one does need a very high score to get into. So actually, for her at least, her score did allow her to follow her career path. The problem is this article is subliminally setting a negative standard. You can get a good job regardless of your degree if you happen to be covered in the media. You don't need to worry about your marks once you start working in a job that you can only get with high marks. It's like saying multi-millionaire tells you not to go on holiday because you can't afford it. I'm sure there are aspects to these people's lives that make them justified to give the advice they are giving. However, it's being posed as out of touch people giving advice to the commoners. They've never had to deal with not being able to choose whatever course they want because their marks don't get them into their dream career. They earned that right, but at the same time, they don't have the experiences that the average person has. I wouldn't take life advice from the Queen. She clearly knows a lot of stuff and has dealt with all kinds of stuff. However, she's never going to know what it's like to live like a regular person, which is also not her fault. And she also doesn't really lecture people. However, that's kind of the way that this article comes across to me. One size doesn't fit all, school doesn't suit everyone, but these people haven't had those experiences, so they aren't the best people to be telling the average person how to go through those experiences. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Again, I don't think these people are bad, I just think the article comes off in the wrong way. Let me know what you think in the comments.